Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and I don't think we've ever had so many requests for army painter videos as we've had since the new Emperor's Children box went up for pre-order. Now last video you'll have seen I did some of the Noise Marines, a little bit of a nostalgic throwback, and whilst they were very much army painting focused, perhaps they were more at the top end of sort of army painting. You know, we were doing 3 or 4, maybe even 5 processes for different stages. You know, perhaps an army that you want to pour yourself into and be getting nominations for best army and things like that. A lot of people have got in touch saying essentially they really want an Emperor's Children army, but they're a little bit scared or a little bit unsure of how on earth to get it painted in a realistic time frame and get it on the table and also get it looking cool. So I thought, let's take some of the things we've learned recently from, say, the Krieg videos, and let's apply it to these Emperor's Children. So I sat there and I thought, right, if I was doing this army and there were certain parameters, so I had to get it done relatively quickly, none of the stages could be perhaps more than maybe 3 processes at the very most. And also I wanted to try and make it fairly process and potentially product driven. So those of you who perhaps don't have the fine motor skills to achieve some of the things that you see on a lot of these Emperor's Children models, well, that doesn't matter. Let's look at how we can circumvent that and still create a really cool looking army. There's also a tiny ulterior motive to this because I'm thinking I want to do a new Heresy Marine project in the summer, and Emperor's Children is a temptation. So I thought, I don't particularly like the black and pink box art scheme, but I love the deep, rich purple scheme from the Heresy Emperor's Children. So let's see, can we tweak that and see how I would go about approaching getting a pretty great looking army done in very little time. So I hope you enjoy. Let's paint. As with all Marines, the armour colour is nearly always going to be the most impactful thing on the model. And one of the things I love about the Heresy scheme is we've got these beautiful white shoulder pads next to that purple armour. So shoulder pads is going to be the first thing I address. Now I'm going to base coat them using a sort of turquoisey colour. This is Thunderhawk Blue. Incubi Darkness would probably work equally well, but that's just because we know it goes nicely next to purple and pink. And I'm just going to base coat these whilst they're on the model. They're just blue tacked on at the minute. And that's so that if I want to do a little bit of light sourcing, I can make sure that the pads are lined up correctly. So I've numbered the miniatures and I'll keep the pads next to the models. But this means that the orientation of the pads is going to be how they are on the final miniature. So I know where to put my highlights on them. And I've thinned this about 50-50 with normal airbrush thinner, spraying about 20 to 25 PSI, just getting a nice base coat of it. And then for the white, I'm going to use Tamiya flat white. Now I am going to use the airbrush for the armour on these. The airbrush is one of my favourite tools, and particularly for painting things like white, I think it's absolutely invaluable. If you don't have an airbrush, just follow the recipe that I'm using. So perhaps substitute the Tamiya out for a normal paint. And perhaps you could do sponging or dry brushing, or maybe even just normal layering up. Perhaps get some rattle cans to get a similar effect. But the highlight for the whites you can see here by using Tamiya XF2 flat white with Tamiya thinner. I can thin the paint right the way down, but still get lovely level of control and create a nice, smooth, bright white highlight onto the miniature. And again, I'm spraying about 20 to 25 PSI, and then I've thinned this about 3 drops, maybe even 4 drops of thinner to paint. And that's it. Because those layers are so translucent, because they're so see-through, as we build them up over that base sort of turquoise colour, we get a few lovely different tones and then a nice bright white highlight. And you'll see actually in the shadows, I've left it just that pure turquoise colour. So it's quite dramatic, but I think quite good fun. Then I'm just varnishing them up and sticking some decals over them. Now, I can pop those off and address the purple armour itself. I want to get out the habit of using the same paints again and again, purely because I do this for a channel and you guys probably get a bit bored of it. If it was just me and I was just doing it for myself, I would not be experimenting very much at all. I'm a creature of habit. I know what I like, and if it works, I tend to buy several pots of it. But I had found I'd had this MIG gunmetal in my box for ages. I don't think I'd ever used it. It's incredible. I will be switching over to this almost permanently, I think, now for my sort of dark silver base paint. Previously, I've used colours like Iron Warriors by Games Workshop or Burnt Iron by Vallejo Metal Colour Series. This paint essentially has all the properties I like of both of those when I mix them together. So yeah, sometimes it is good to, you know, see what else is out there. So I'm going to give the model a base coat over the black primer of that silver. And now I'm going to give it a highlight. Now, just like we would with a black and a white, here we're going to use a dark metallic colour and a light metallic colour. And on the testers, I did just a chrome, and it looked fine. And then I thought, well, when you look in the artwork, it's kind of got that nice little pink hue when we, purple in the shadows, pink in the highlights. I wonder if I use a coloured metallic in the pre-highlight, that will work. And it did work beautifully on the tester. So I'm going to use Tourmaline Alchemy here. It's by Scale 75. If you don't have this paint, and it's quite hard to get hold of, you can always mix in, say, a pink into a silver to create it. And I say go back and watch that Noise Marine video if you haven't already. And we look at creating various coloured metallics in that video. So here I am, just sort of a little bit gingerly starting off where the highlights are. I love metallic or clear or candy schemes. I think for gaming, they're absolutely brilliant. They're not particularly difficult to paint. Metallics do so much work for you, as in when the light hits it, it creates all these beautiful highlights and shadows for you. But I still kind of want to place them where I want them. But this is nice and simple, as if, imagine the top, the light is coming from the top down. Essentially, as my lamp is shining on it, you can see where those highlights would be on the miniature. But yeah, I think whilst perhaps it's not the most rewarding type of scheme to do from a painting point of view, as in to really elevate it to like properly high levels, it's very, very simple to do. It's very relaxing to do, and it has massive impact on the table. Coming mainly from a heresy sort of hobby background, certainly over the last decade or so, metallic schemes, clear schemes, candy schemes, they're really quite common. They're really quite prevalent in that hobby scene. But it's something I see very little of when I go to 40k events and see, various armies there. So it was another reason I thought it'd be fun to do a 40k model, but use this sort of candy scheme. And yeah, I'm getting a little bit braver here on the second model now. I'm a bit more used to how it works. And just sticking those highlights in. And I genuinely think it's worth it. And this is something I'm going to play around with a little bit on some future schemes. Now, for the purple itself, I'm going to use this Citadel Air Paint Eidolon Purple Clear. Now, I did find that actually this paint behaved much nicer if I used the Tamiya thinner with it. This isn't always the case. Sometimes it just turns my normal water-based acrylics into porridge. But actually, this was it produced a nicer result using the Tamiya for this. 99% of the time, I just use like Vallejo airbrush thinner or life color thinner or whatever. But this time I felt it was worth using the thing. And I guess that's just to do how the paint is created. And I've thinned this about 2 drops of thinner to paint. Possibly I could have just gone 50-50 to be honest, because it took quite a lot of layers. But the nice thing with clears is it's kind of like spraying coloured gloss varnish onto the model. You create this sort of shell over the model, and every layer of it you put on, you get more and more depth to it. If I just spray contrast paint over metallics, you kind of get a metallic X colour. When you use candies or clear coats, you get that candy effect, that depth, which I just think looks absolutely wonderful. And the trick really is you just keep the layers relatively thin and layer them up, let them dry in between. So you'll see here, I'm just going to leave it and you'll see me applying more and more, and the purple gets stronger and stronger. And all I would say is keep a note of your dilution and then keep a note of how many layers you do in total on the model. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. So you keep me and Andy doing this full time. Over there, you're getting a bunch of high-end display level stuff like his Golden Demon project at the minute. And it means you also get the videos over here, plus a bunch of extra stuff, which we could not do without you guys. So we hugely, hugely appreciate all of that support. Likes, subscribes, and comments, as ever, make a massive difference to a YouTuber as well. So thank you. Now, the next step, oils. If you've watched any of our videos, you know that I absolutely love to use oil washes. It's a very specific look. And again, we're trying to do army painting here, but not in perhaps that typical Games Workshop style, not in that perhaps typical slap chop style, just a different style, not a better or a worse, but simply a different way of doing it. So we've applied our nice smooth base coats onto the model. And now we're going to use some oil paint to create some definition, to create some contrast, to create some grit and dirt and grime and basically life to the model. So I've thinned down this black oil with mineral spirits, roughly 50-50. If I thin it too much, it will split out. If I don't thin it enough, it's not going to flow over the model. Testing it on a little bit of sprue here, absolutely perfect consistency. It's quite a thick wash actually, and I want it to be a thick wash because I want to use the fact that I can manipulate it when it's dried to create a little bit of extra shading with very, very little skill or effort. Because the candy has a very gloss finish, it's going to encourage this paint to run into the recesses more so than stay on the flat surfaces. So the solvents that are in that wash, coupled with the glossy surface, means you get this capillary action, it's called, where all that paint and that pigment is really sort of sucked into all the recesses. But we do get a little bit staying on the surfaces. Now, I'm not just going to splodge it over the entire model and then take it all off in that classic reductive style. I'm probably going to go somewhere in between. So I'm not being mega targeted. I'm using quite a big brush here. It hasn't got a particularly fantastic point on it. It's just an old natural brush that wasn't any good anymore. But it's fine for oils. But I don't mind getting a little bit of build up here and there in the recesses, but also on some of the flat surfaces, because we're going to use that to our advantage in most cases, or just wipe it clean off if we don't want it there. Now, I've tried to leave loads and loads of the steps in this video in real time and in their entirety. I don't often do that in videos for here because I kind of want to rattle through stuff on YouTube. We don't really have time to do great big multi-part series here on YouTube. But I thought the amount of people that have asked about this sort of wanting to get this army painted, Emperor's Children stuff done, I thought maybe this will be sort of helpful to give an idea of what you should expect going into this project. This is still not going to be as quick and easy as something like a slap chop or just a dry brush or a I don't know, just that classic what to Games Workshop Battle Ready, where you just put the contrast and stuff over it. But everything we do is really aimed at people who enjoy painting, and the process of painting itself is something that brings them a level of satisfaction. So we're never really going to address things like the quickest way to paint stuff. It's just what we feel are enjoyable ways to paint stuff, and I hope that comes across. Not pretending it's better or worse at all. But here you see I've walked the dog, so it's had about an hour to dry, and I'm able to, with a dry, soft bristle brush, just remove and kind of buff that oil into the recesses and help blend it in. Where the oil is still a little bit wet, you can see there my brush dragged it off onto the surface. Easiest way to get rid of that, use a cotton bud, very gently, just wipe it away, and then you get rid of it. Or you could be more patient and let it dry in its entirety. I'm not a patient man. Yeah, normally a hairdryer or whatever, but this little area here around his shin, you can see where the buildup is, right? So you know you're probably going to get an issue going straight in there with a brush and smooshing it all around. So I think, okay, I'm going to push my brush up into it. So I push any of that excess pigment into the recesses where I don't mind the paint being. And also if I do drag it onto a flat surface, then I'll try and make sure that I pull the brush towards the ground. So if I do get any streaks, they kind of just look a bit like oil or a bit like, dirt and grime that's streaking down. Again, it's just trying to be efficient and very deliberate with everything that we do. And the armour has far more work on it than any other stage on this model. But it's a marine. And let's be honest, marines are probably the simplest things to paint. So we can take a little bit of time on the armour because it's 90+% of the miniature anyway. And it's their thing, right? It's the calling card. It's the standout part of a marine is their armour. So I think it's worth spending that little bit of extra time on, even if you're doing quite a limited paint job like we're going to do on this one. So once I was happy, I'd cleaned all the oil up with the miniature. You can see it's really very glossy. It's not really my cup of tea. You might love this, in which case just leave it. But I wanted to just dull it down slightly, not all the way down to a matte, so I've chosen a satin varnish. And if you've got a model that's got a lot of metallics on, satin varnish is a really nice one to go for, because you still retain quite a lot of that natural shine. But it just takes the edge off, so it's a little bit easier to look at. Now I'm going to go in and paint all the connective stuff on the armour, so the black bits, but I'm also going to paint every other detail that I want to paint different to the purple armour. I'm going to base coat that with black as well. This is by no means an essential stage. This bit is obviously painting the connective bit, but painting the other bits black, it's not essential. Our commissioned sheath Ben never does it because it's not the most efficient way of doing it. The main reason that I do it is I find it helps me to look at the model. It helps me think about what I want to paint, where I want to paint, and it helps me not forget things as well. If I just leave everything in the purple, I get to the end of the paint job and realise, I've missed a tassel or I've missed something else. If I do it at this stage, I identify what I want to paint. I find it really useful. Now, trim is going to be a major concern. Well, I know it is. People have messaged me about it. If you've watched many of my heresy videos, you'll know that I don't paint an awful lot of the trim a different colour. It's a stylistic choice. I like the way it looks to have armour with the same colour trim on it. But I do like to paint elements of the trim, sometimes maybe just the shoulder pad trim. But for instance, these guys have so much of this sort of filigree and extra trim on them. I thought it would be nice to paint a little bit of it here and there. So the shoulder pads, absolutely I'm going to do. And again, in the sort of spirit of trying to not just use the same paints all the time, I'm not going to use decayed metal, which is the metallic brown sort of that I tend to use for base coating all my golds and brasses and bronzes. I thought, right, how can I create this just using Citadel paints? Because that's what people ask all the time. I had to previously said, I'll use Rhinox and Retributor, that would work fine. And then I thought, I wonder if a contrast paint would work better. And lo and behold, Cygor Brown mixed into Retributor Gold is wonderful. So not only do we get just about the right colour, so like a warm metallic brown, but also that contrast paint gives it those contrast properties, which means it's really, really nice to paint on and layer up and get a nice, solid, smooth base coat with. And now I've gone back in with almost pure Retributor. There's probably a dot of Cygor in there because it's mixed on the palette. And I'm just doing very, very sparing highlights where the light would hit the shoulder pad and brighten up. Now back to our gunmetal. Oh, that's it for the gold, by the way. And then back to our gunmetal. And we'll just use this for all the various silver parts of the model. And again, just like the armour, I want to focus on being fairly neat and tidy, but getting a nice smooth finish to the paint. So I don't want there to be really visible brush strokes. So I'm thinking about where I start my brush and where I end my brush, the direction I pull the paint. And if I need to do 2 thin coats to get a smooth finish, I will. If I can do it in 1 coat, I'll use 1. If I need to use 3, I'll use 3. It's whatever's going to give me the nicest finish on the model. That's what's the most important thing to me. For the connected stuff, and there's a lot of it on these Slaanesh models, and I'm really looking forward to seeing people perhaps take some inspiration from the artwork. I saw it on those is it Flawless Blades, the Swordmaster miniatures for them, where they've really gone in for that old style artwork like Adrian Smith did, where this connective stuff has become sort of fused into their skin and their muscles. And that's pretty cool. I'd really like to do one of those Flawless Blade models, and I think in that Flawless Host scheme, which a lot of people have requested, I need to work on that a little bit more. So when that release comes out, providing you guys would like it, and let me know in the comments if you would like to see that Flawless Host, so that very, very pale pink scheme done with the purple flames and everything, I think I'd like to try that on those Flawless Blade models and have a bit of fun. So you saw there on the details, just keep it simple. I've chosen turquoise and purple as colours for the tassels because we know they complement the purple on the armour. Now for the sort of, I don't know what they are, sexy little leather bits, these one-legged chaps that he's wearing here. I thought keep it black because it's a nice sort of secondary colour or tertiary colour, and keep it simple. So I'm going to mix in a little pale blue here into my black, so that I'm staying in that either purple or kind of blue tone for the majority of the model. I'm just going to do some little scratches following where the highlight would be if it was still the armour. So you can see on the foot and the top of the shin plate where the highlight is. So we're just going to follow that line down with our highlight here. Now, if you don't feel you have the brush control for this, use a sponge. It'll look slightly different, but it'll still look really nice because it will look textured, it will look different. This material will appear at a glance on the model to clearly be different to whatever the armour is underneath it. I'm going to use a brush and just do lots of little dashes on here. But I would say this is probably the most fine motor skill element of the paint job. But it's not on all of the models. It's a really nice feature, I think, on them. And, all we've done here is 3 colours: black, a black pale blue mix, and then a heavier pale blue to black mix for the final highlight. But I've really, really enjoyed painting these Emperor's Children models. I enjoy painting Marines any day, but yeah, really nice to have a go with these guys and play around with the different colours. And as I say, I'm humming and ahhing about maybe a new Heresy Marine project for the summer, and Emperor's Children are right up there. And it would probably be a variation on this scheme, I suspect. For the bear head, I've done it exactly the same as I've done over on the Noise Marine video, which I will link up. So go and check that out if you like it. But again, it's very, very simple. And we're just trying to make sure each stage is as impactful as it possibly can be. Now, for all those other areas on the model that we've painted now since the armour, it's time to just bring a little bit of dirt and grime and definition into those. So we're going to use another oil wash. In this case, I've chosen to use a dark brown rather than a black. I love black on purple, blue, green, red armour. Colours like that, I think it works brilliantly on. And we finished it so it's a similar sheen to the armour. This, let's not finish it with a varnish. Let's let the oil, the finish of the oil, that lovely matte finish of the oil, be the finish on the model. And adding a bit of brown into it You know, as I say, it's a very, very dark brown-black sort of colour. It's just going to add a little bit of extra variation on. But I'm applying it in an almost identical way that I've applied the black earlier to the armour. It's quite a thick wash. We'll plop it all over, particularly the shoulder pads, but also, you know, all the other little bits and bobs we've done. And then we'll clean it up in exactly the same way. So you can see there at the bottom of the pad where gravity has pulled it down a little bit. We'll need to sort of buff that, blend that in. And then at the top of the pad where the specular highlight is, that circular highlight at the top of the pad, I've needed to wet the brush ever so slightly so I could remove a little bit more of the oil. Honestly, if you can be patient with oil, it's even friendlier. But hopefully you can see here that when it misbehaves, it's really not a lot of work to clean it up. So you see there, we've got a little bit of it staining on the surface. So with a slightly damp brush, I'm just going in, cleaning it up, creating a few streaks here and there, and just revealing that nice bright white underneath it. Now for the eye lenses, I wanted again to try and keep it as simple as possible. You may find this easier to use something like a white ink rather than a white paint that I'm using here, and you just literally, you know, load your brush up, touch it to the eye lens, let it wick off your brush, and just fill the eye lens. Because all I'm looking to do here is create a nice bright white for a contrast paint to go under. I've chosen to paint the lens itself first, so I get a really nice solid opaque white on there, and then sort of wash in a white around that to give us that kind of faux sort of, I don't know, glow, I guess you'd call it. But just something fun, really, is all we're going for on this. And I chose to use a green contrast paint because, well, I mean, that's what the artwork used to be for them for Heresy, was green eye lenses, which obviously I have an issue with because they're baddies, and I always feel baddies ought to have red eye lenses, but you can't deny just how delicious green looks against that purple. So I suppose it's a compromise worth having. I was absolutely could not. I don't know what was wrong with me with this one. I could not get the amount of contrast paint on my brush correct. I either had too much or too little. Right pain in the bum, but yeah, got there in the end. And then for the base, you see I've just used some brown texture paste on there, very, very sparingly. And then I'm just going to smoosh in some light sienna and some natural sienna powders. Basically anything yellow and orangey will look great. But I didn't want it to be dominating. I didn't want it to overpower the paint job. But I thought a little bit of orange in there would be a nice little contrast. So I'm applying it dry, and I'm going to really smoosh it into all the little crevices that we've created on the base, and basically tap off any of the excess on there. So it means that when you're gaming and stuff, it's not going to be an issue. And then I'll go in, paint a nice simple black rim, and we're done with the model. So there are many stages that I think you could add to these models if you wanted to elevate them, but I deliberately have not done for this paint job. What would I do? I would probably do the eye lenses in a slightly more traditional way, you know, highlights and all the rest of it on it. And I would probably go back in and do a re-highlight on some of the edges on, say, the gold, the silvers, possibly even do a highlight on the purple armour, because that's what I enjoy doing. But I very deliberately have not done any of that in this video because I wanted to show you what I think is an absolutely great looking scheme that can be done very, very simply. You can break it down, you can batch paint, you can do all elements of the army and then move on and do the second, you know, you could do all the shoulder pads for the entire army if you wanted. You could do all the purple armour on and then move on. You could do all the tassels, all the heads. It's done in such a way that, you know, if you're doing it for yourself, you're doing a commission job or whatever, the most efficient way of getting an awesome looking army on the table, and you're not cutting any corners. You're just being very, very deliberate with what you do and what you don't do. Now, I've included a couple of shots here with some other miniatures people had asked for, because these New Emperor's Children, they're definitely taller. The Power Armour Marines and the Noise Marines are particularly gigantic. But I think the Havocs are nowadays as well, actually, for normal Chaos Marines. So just chucked in a few pictures here of them with some of the other marine and human models and stuff I've painted over the last few years, just to give you guys an idea in case you're wondering. And of course, some of you may have noticed that on the actual models for themselves, I've used a couple of heresy heads. So we've got a Blood Angels heresy head on there. We've got, what else is on there? An old Emperor's Children one, actually, a Palatine Blade one. And then the other three, two are from the kit, and then one is just a plain Mark 6 head. And that's just because I have a big Heresy Bits box and I like using things from it. I find it pleasing to look at. But I think the miniatures themselves, I think, are really great. I hope people are going to enjoy themselves coming up with different schemes, as I have. And as I mentioned earlier, if you would like to see some more Emperor's Children stuff, please let me know in the comments. I only know if you guys want it if you tell me, or you tell me over on Patreon, or you tell me over on our Discord. And if I know it's something that enough of you would like to see, then I can plan it and see how we can fit it into the schedule. So I say flawless, what they call the flawless host, I think, something like that. Pale pink, purple flames, really cool scheme. I'd love to have a go on that with the next wave of the Emperor's Children come out. And on that note, the amount of you that replied in the last video that you would like to see that new Ministorum kill team when it comes out, see me paint it up in a sort of, if it was just for me, so my interpretation of what Grimdark means. So when it's time to do those guys and they come out, I'm going to go for it, and I hope you guys enjoy. So thank you very much for all of you who commented and asked to see that. So as ever, if you've any questions about anything I've done in the video, please don't hesitate to pop them down in the comments, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you ever so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com, and maybe Ben can sort you out.